Trading is one of the best ways to improve your team, and thankfully week 2 has presented us with a lot of buy low opportunities. I'm going to give you 15 guys I think you need to go out and trade for right now before their value goes back up. And let's start with one of the biggest buy lows I've ever seen, and that is Jamar Chase right now. People are really panicking about this guy. I mean, really, we're panicking about Jamar Chase after 2 games. Joe Burrow didn't play the entire preseason. He's dealing with that calf injury. We know not only is Joe Burrow going to be much better, but so will Jamar Chase. He's still a stud, a young wide receiver. If you have the opportunity to go out and get a guy like Jamar Chase, he can absolutely be a game-changing, league-winning player for your team. Here are some potential trades I would be looking to make for Jamar Chase in my leagues. I would be more than happy to trade Derrick Henry for Jamar Chase. Look, Derrick Henry's been fine, but Tyjae Spears taking all the third down snaps, also eating into his carries. I think Jamar Chase long-term, a much better play than Derrick Henry. If you want to go wide receiver for wide receiver, I'm okay moving Stephon Diggs for Jamar Chase. Josh Allen in this offense just doesn't look quite the same to me. I still think Stephon Diggs will be good this year, but maybe not top 3 good like Jamar Chase can. And then I'd also be willing to package Garrett Wilson and Kenneth Walker to get Jamar Chase. 2 of my biggest sell highs right now. Garrett Wilson saved his day with a 68-yard catch and run for a touchdown, but outside of that, it's looking bleak. And Kenneth Walker saved his day with 2 touchdowns, but hasn't looked great this season so far. If I could move these guys for a player like Jamar Chase right now, I absolutely would. A.J. Brown is another wide receiver who is disappointed so far, and he's taken a backseat to his teammate Devonta Smith in each of the first 2 games. But he was this close to scoring not 1, but 2 touchdowns last week. In fact, he did score a touchdown, but it got called back on a hold. We know this guy has tremendous upside. The usage is still there. He's still tied to Jalen Hurts in a great offense. He's a fantastic buy low opportunity right now. And I'd be willing to make trades like Joe Mixon and Mike Evans for him. Mike Evans has been off to a great start so far this season. Somebody might think Mike Evans is going to be better than A.J. Brown this year. I don't. I still think A.J. Brown will be significantly better than Mike Evans. I just talked about Kenneth Walker, and I would be more than happy to trade him straight up for A.J. Brown. I'm a little nervous about Kenneth Walker. Sure, he's always got touchdown upside, but doesn't give you a lot outside of that. Then I mentioned Garrett Wilson and Kenneth Walker for Jamar Chase. I think you might be able to do Garrett Wilson and Raheem Mostert for A.J. Brown right now. Raheem Mostert has had 2 very nice games to start the season. One of my favorite sell highs because he has 2 more brutal matchups coming up, and then he gets Jeff Wilson back in week 5. So if I could trade these guys for a guy like A.J. Brown right now, I think that's a great sell high. Last year, Josh Jacobs won people championships. This year, he's probably led him to 0-2 starts, but the usage is there. He's got 28 carries through 2 games, 7 catches through 2 games. Everything is still there for Josh Jacobs. He's just had a brutal start to the season as far as schedule goes. It doesn't get much easier in week 3 against the Steelers, but then he gets the Chargers. Things should be okay. Now is the time to pounce on a truly elite RB1 that you can get at a value. And I know I keep talking about Garrett Wilson, but I would be more than happy to trade Garrett Wilson straight up for Josh Jacobs right now if I could. I'd also be willing to trade a wide receiver like DK Metcalf and maybe package him with a guy like Raheem Mostert, who I just talked about. I think DK Metcalf will be fine this year, but I don't think he's going to have the upside we normally expect from him in this offense. And then I'd also be willing to move a running back like DeAndre Swift, who just came off a huge game, and a wide receiver like DJ Moore, who had a nice game, for an upgrade at the running back position with Josh Jacobs. If I could do that right now, I would. Another running back that I think is a great buy low right now is Ramondre Stevenson of the Patriots. He's been okay so far, but not what people have expected. But he's had 27 carries through 2 games, 9 receptions. That's what we like to see. That's what we're looking for from Ramondre. And after Zeke was pretty heavily involved in week 1, he was pretty much invisible in week 2. I got to think Ramondre wasn't fully healthy after having like some kind of stomach bug right before the game in week 1. Zeke looks irrelevant here. This is Ramondre's backfield. If you can go out and get a running back like this right now, you should. And I know I keep talking about Garrett Wilson, but I think he's a tremendous sell high right now. If I could get Ramondre Stevenson for Garrett Wilson, I would. And then again, I would be willing to package a receiver like DK Metcalf and maybe a running back like Zach Moss, who looked good in week 1, but might lose his job to Jonathan Taylor in a couple weeks. I think that's a good sell high on Zach Moss. And I'd also be willing to do another 1-for-1 trade with a wide receiver like Deebo Samuel. Had a nice week 2, but we know in this offense, there's going to be weeks where it's Deebo, weeks where it's Ayuk, weeks where it's Kittle. I'd rather have that running back. Now let's get to a couple guys who haven't even played yet this year, but I think are fantastic buy lows. Let's start with Cooper Kupp, who right now people really think Puka Nacua might be the Rams wide receiver 1, even when Cooper Kupp comes back. Like, come on. Imagine if Cooper Kupp was healthy, what he would be doing right now in this offense. This offense is throwing the ball at a tremendous rate. They're playing a ton of snaps. When Kupp comes back and is healthy, he's going to be primed for an absolutely unbelievable season, and people are worried about guys like Puka Nacua and even Tutu Atwell. So if you could trade a running back like Kenneth Walker and a wide receiver like DJ Moore for him right now and stash him on your IR, do it. Also, a running back like Joe Mixon, who I talked about, I'm not super high on Joe Mixon this year, and a wide receiver like Deebo Samuel, who just came off a big game, I think would get you Cooper Kupp right now. And if you're okay streaming tight end, I would be fine trading Darren Waller and Deebo Samuel to get Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp has legitimate league-winning upside when he comes back and is healthy, and people aren't acting like it. And then Jonathan Taylor also has legitimate league-winning upside. We just saw what Zach Moss did in this offense when given most of the touches. We've already heard Jonathan Taylor is back at practice and expected to be ready to play week 5, which means you only have to go 2 more weeks without Jonathan Taylor. And look, there's a chance he still gets traded. I don't think so. I think he's just going to play for the Colts. But as we saw with Zach Moss, that's okay. And once again, I'm going to say, if you could trade Garrett Wilson straight up for Jonathan Taylor right now, I think that is a great sell high. Again, you probably only have to go 2 more weeks, and then Jonathan Taylor is your every week RB1. A couple other players I've already talked about. If you could package DK Metcalf and maybe a running back like Joe Mixon together and get Jonathan Taylor, do it. And then I haven't talked about DeAndre Hopkins, but I think he's another great sell high. I know he didn't have a big week 2, but people still like DeAndre Hopkins. They still value him very highly. And I already talked about Raheem Mostert. He's a tremendous sell high. If I could move these guys for Jonathan Taylor, I would. Now let's go with a couple of Colts players, and I really like what I've seen from Michael Pittman so far. 8 catches in each of the first 2 games. And Anthony Richardson looks like he might be the real deal. And even if we get Gardner Minshew, he's good enough. And I really don't think people are valuing Pittman that highly at the moment. So if I could trade a running back like Kenneth Walker straight up for Pittman, I definitely would. I'd also trade a running back like Joe Mixon straight up for Michael Pittman. And if you wanted to do a wide receiver for wide receiver swap, I think DeAndre Hopkins could get it done. Now, I said we were talking about 2 Colts. I rarely recommend you go out and trade for a quarterback, but go out and trade for Anthony Richardson. Number 1, he left that game with an injury, and people are worried that this guy is going to be injury prone all year long, and he might miss week 3, so whoever has him might be willing to move him. But we've seen it so far this year. This guy has legit league-winning, league-breaking upside. If only somebody told you about him all offseason. Oh well. If you rolled with Daniel Jones in week 2 after his monster game, I would happily move him for Anthony Richardson and just stream a QB in week 3. Once again, if somebody wants Raheem Mostert, they're desperate at running back, and they're willing to give you Anthony Richardson, take it. And same thing with a wide receiver like Sky Moore, who came through a little bit in week 2, had a touchdown, but still not heavily involved. Use this opportunity to sell high on Sky Moore and get a league-changing quarterback. All right, let's go back to running back. James Conner was one of my favorite values in fantasy drafts, and nothing has changed. I think he's a tremendous buy low. Through 2 games, he has 37 attempts. He is getting all the run in this backfield. And look, the Cardinals have been fairly competitive with Josh Dobbs. They're going to bring Kyler Murray back at some point, and when they do, this offense is going to get better, and that's going to help James Conner. And if you could get him straight up for a wide receiver like Jerry Jeudy, who people are still really high on, not loving this Denver offense, I would do it. I would also do it straight up for Chris Godwin. I think Chris Godwin will be okay this week, but he's not going to have a massive ceiling. Give me the running back who has more potential upside, especially down the stretch. And then once again, I would move DeAndre Hopkins straight up for James Conner, especially if you need a running back. Let's go with a couple wide receivers now. Let's go out to Baltimore rookie Zay Flowers. Didn't follow up his big week 1 with a big week 2, but he's had a 28% target share through 2 games. Having Mark Andrews back didn't seem to affect him too much, and he's a rookie. We know he's only going to get better and better as the season goes on. So now after a disappointing week 2, people might be thinking week 1 was a mirage and be willing to move him. And if the team with Zay Flowers needs a running back, you might be able to get him for running backs like Zach Moss, who, as I mentioned, might lose his job in a couple weeks. Or Raheem Mostert, who I keep dropping because his value is sky high and he's one of my favorite sells. And also a running back like Alexander Mattison, who no, he hasn't been great so far, but people still believe in his potential. And then there's Mike Williams, who's been overshadowed by Keenan Allen through 2 weeks, but the usage is there. A boom game is coming. In week 2, he had the 10th most air yards of any wide receiver. He also had a massive amount of air yards in week 1, even though he missed almost 30% of the snaps. Once again, if you can get him straight up for a running back like Kenneth Walker, I'd do it. And if you're okay streaming tight end, I'd be okay packaging Darren Waller and a running back like Zach Moss to get Mike Williams. And then finally, I'd be okay moving 2 guys I've already talked about, Jerry Jeudy and Alexander Mattison. I don't see big seasons from these guys. Give me the boom potential of Mike Williams. All right, let's go back to running back with a guy I wasn't high on really in the draft process, Isaiah Pacheco. I don't think he's going to be a monster this year, but it looks like he started to take over this backfield, had 12 of the 14 running back carries in week 1, and he's gotten 100% of the red zone snaps through 2 weeks. So we know the touchdown potential is there. Now his upside is going to be a bit capped because he doesn't really catch a lot of passes, but as a low-end RB2 with touchdown upside, he'll do the trick. And it probably won't take much to get him right now. I'll bet you if you offered Cortland Sutton, you could get Isaiah Pacheco. Same thing with his teammate Sky Moore, who just had a touchdown. People may be believing again. I'd prefer the running back. And if you want to go running back for running back, again, I think Zach Moss is a great sell high right now. Now, I talked about the Cardinals offense with James Conner, but I'm also looking to buy Marquise Brown right now. He's been kind of okay with Josh Dobbs so far. Josh Dobbs has looked kind of decent, I guess. Good enough. But the real reason you're buying Marquise Brown here is for when Kyler Murray comes back. This team is playing hard. They're obviously not tanking. Kyler will be back. Get Marquise Brown now before people realize it while he's still cheap. And again, you could probably get him for a running back like Zach Moss because people think Zach Moss is now the RB1 in Indy. And sure, he might be, but only for 2 more weeks. And even though Bijan Robinson looks like he's taking over the backfield, people still believe in Tyler Algier. He's still got a decent amount of work. I bet you could get Marquise Brown for Tyler Algier. And then if you want to go wide receiver, I'm again going to recommend Sky Moore, who has some good sell high value right now. Now let's talk about a player who didn't even play in week 2, and that is Jacoby Myers. But you have to be encouraged by what you saw in week 2 because outside of Devontae Adams getting 8 targets, no other pass catcher got over 3 targets. It's obvious Jacoby Myers is the clear number 2 here when he comes back, and it was a concussion. He'll probably be back in week 3. If you're looking for a relatively cheap wide receiver that you can just plug and play, go look for Jacoby Myers. Once again, I'm going to say you could probably get him for a running back like Zach Moss, a running back like Tyler Algier, and again, if you want to do a wide receiver for wide receiver swap, look for Sky Moore. And then finally, if you're looking to trade for a tight end because your tight end stinks, or maybe you traded away Darren Waller like I recommended in here and got a better upgrade at another position, go see if you can get Sam Laporta. Through 2 games, 11 targets, 10 catches, 102 yards. That would be a 17-game pace of 93 targets, 85 catches, and 867 yards. That'll do it for a tight end. And it probably will take next to nothing to get him. If you've been rolling with Geno Smith as your QB and you're fine streaming, go see if the guy who has Sam Laporta needs a quarterback, offer him Geno Smith. Also, might not be a bad idea to offer Kenneth Gainwell. People saw what he did in week 1. They might be a little bit worried about DeAndre Swift, but there's a potential for Gainwell. And again, we're talking about Sam Laporta. And then I think Treylon Burks is another good sell high. After a decent game in week 2, he's always going to be behind DeAndre Hopkins. He's not going to have massive upside while Hopkins is there. I'd rather have the set and forget tight end like Laporta. So there's 15 players you should go try to buy low, but we got you covered with everything you need to dominate your week 3 matchup. Check out this playlist right here.